discouraged when no answer came. See, I'd prayed for years and I still saw no change. I was ready to give up on my wish coming true. But when I prayed that last time, His power broke through. And prayer is just as big as God is. Prayer is just as strong as God is strong. Prayer can reach as far as God can reach. Don't ever give up. Just pray, just pray. Don't ever give up. Just pray. We have been given a means to the throne of the one whose potential is yet to be known. There is no limit as to what God can do. So just keep on praying. He's listening to you. And prayer is just as big as God is. Prayer is just as strong as God is strong. Prayer can reach as far as God can reach. Don't ever give up.
All we like sheep have gone astray. We have all turned, each to his own way. We are like lost and lonely lambs. Can someone here show us the right way? Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Truly he was bruised for me, that I could live tomorrow. If we could only see our sin, would we allow the world to blind us? If we would only turn to him and let him put our past behind us, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Truly he was bruised for me, that I might live tomorrow. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Truly he was bruised for me, that I might live tomorrow. Come we that love the Lord, and let our joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord, join in a song with sweet accord, and thus surround the throne, and thus surround the throne. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God.
Come, brothers and mothers, come, sisters and brothers, come, join us in singing the praises of Zion, the praises of Zion.
Oh, fathers, don't you feel determined to meet within the walls of Zion? We'll shout and go round, we'll shout and go round, we'll shout and go round, we'll shout and go round the walls of Zion. The walls of Zion, yes, we're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Then let our songs abound, and every tear be dry. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground, we're marching through Emmanuel's ground, to fairer worlds on high, to fairer worlds on high. Fathers and mothers, come sisters and brothers, come join us in singing the praises of Zion.
We ready? All right. Good morning. Good to see each and every one of you here. Good morning to our folks at home. We appreciate you tuning in. And we're going to pick up where we left off a couple of weeks ago. I appreciate very much Brother Bill Boppman filling in last week and doing an excellent job. I was able to go over to Farwell and preach the installation service for the new pastor over there, and excited for them to have him and his wife. They're from this area. They're from Bay City. She was actually a good friend, Amanda, his wife's name. She was actually a very good friend growing up with Bethany Payne, now Gregory. And in fact, Brother Wergowski, the pastor, Kyle, he attended Grace College up north, and he got to know James Payne there some. So, I mean, I don't know if we got, I'm not sure what that says for us as a church with them, you know, getting to know the preacher's kids, but at any rate, I'm kidding, y'all. Come on, give me a break. But we have some connection with them communally and that sort of thing. So we're going to pray for them to find a house and get set up. I think they're a very good fit for that church, and I'm excited to see what God will do with them there, and quite excited about that. So it's been a long time coming for that church to have this kind of pastor. I think they've got 3 teenage daughters, the eldest of which is going to Pensacola Christian here in a couple of weeks as a freshman down there. So, and then the other 2 girls that they all look like stair steps, but they're all just a lovely family. And I got to hear him preach Sunday school. I did the main service, and then we had dinner, had an afternoon service. Evening service was in the afternoon after the dinner, and he preached that. And it was like, okay, this is going to work here. This is going to be good. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for you guys letting us go and do what we could to help them as the time went along. Could have gone, for their sake, from their perspective, I could have gone more often. But look, I can't be gone too long from what I do at Midland. So anyway, I appreciate y'all's patience. It's good to see y'all back in here this morning. And we're going to resume our study of the King James Bible issue. Now, I kind of put myself under conviction this morning as I was going over the lesson. Again, I'm thinking, well, Hugh, you don't have a single Bible verse in this whole lesson, you know, because we're talking about the development of the English language. And it's not like we've got a lot of Bible verses to go along with Old English and Middle English and now Modern English. And so it's kind of like, well, but it is Sunday school, you know. And what we're learning is really the background of the language of our Bible. And seeing how God worked, I believe, divinely in the development of the language of the King James Bible, and how he orchestrated human events, I believe, in a great way, to give us the language that he then used to give us this book, in our language, our native heart language. But I just want to say, and we're going to say more about this as we move along to it, but a particular passage that I like when it comes to talking about the King James Bible and the fact of it being the Word of God is in Psalm chapter 12, where it says, "The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord, thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever." Forever. Okay? Forever, it's settled in heaven what the Word of God is. And for us, you know, we're struggling with the issue of living on this earth, in these bodies, wrestling against the powers and principalities and things like that. Not really the flesh and blood's not our main focus, although it gets our attention because we can see that. The greater issue that we have is the spiritual warfare that we wage. And there is a legitimate, ongoing, intense, fierce battle against this book. And it's subtle a lot of times, it's nuanced, sometimes it's a direct frontal assault. Nevertheless, there is a concerted effort to devalue, diminish, even destroy this book in the eyes and minds of the body of Christ. Satan, I don't think he cares that much about what lost people think, because he's kind of got them already in his hip pocket. But he cares what we think, because what we think will determine how well we are reaching those others that are in his hip pocket and getting them out of there. And if he can take away our authority to where it's like every man's opinion, every man doing what's right in his own eyes, you know, pick a Bible verse, whichever Bible you want, pick one. There's hundreds to choose from. But I submit to you, there's only one final authority in the English language, and it's the King James Bible. Now, this Bible came to us by way of our language, the English language. And the English language came through some pretty tumultuous growing, development, that sort of thing. We studied, have we got slides up? Yes, we do, thank you. We studied, first of all, the aspect of the Old English. Now, it's interesting to me that both Old English and Middle English, as we studied, came about largely, greatly influenced by invasions. The Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes came over from northern Europe around 450 to 500 AD, and they brought their languages with them, and they so dominated Britain that they pretty well wiped out the Celtic language that had been here before, with some Latin thrown in with the Roman Empire having been here. But then they basically brought up the Old English, developed into Old English, which had a fairly limited vocabulary of about 50 to 60,000 words. But it was functional. But along about 1066, we had what? Anybody tell me what happened in October of 1066? Say again? What? The French invaded. Battle of Hastings, the Norman invasion, the Norman conquest. They brought French with them, and then on the heels of them, we've already had some presence of the church, which initially was not Roman Catholic, but Roman Catholicism developed, and it brought Latin and that sort of thing. And then you throw in some, but it was all about the Norman invasion, the Angles and the Sacs early on. Then the Normans came in, and you, by the way, throw in some Viking invasions along the way too, and they sprinkled some words into the language. So it was all about the invasion and the influence that came about from that. Well, then as we studied, you know, like I said, if you can hold out for a couple hundred years or so, you can eventually have your country back and your language back. And that's what they got. Finally, they got it back. If I can just, let me back this up and let's, so let's look at this quote again from Professor McGrath, where he says, no longer, and we're talking about the end of the Middle English period, in the 1400s, right, into the 1400s, the 15th century. He says, no longer was English dismissed as the language of the lower classes. It was now the language of choice of a nation with an increasing sense of national identity and shared purpose, strengthened by England's growing maritime enterprise. So, England was now poised to come forth as an even greater, more developed, and influential in an influential way in the course of human history and the will of God with His Word. And we got Middle English came in on the heels of, Modern English came in on the heels of Middle English, and we're going to take a look at that now because that happened from around 1500 to the present. Now, the story of the King James Bible cannot be told without an understanding of the remarkable rise of confidence in the English language that came about in the 16th century, that is to say the 1500s. A development in English was called the Great Vowel Shift. It was a major change in the pronunciation of long vowels in English that took place primarily in the 1400s and between the 1400s and the 1600s. So it was a transition period between the Middle English and the Modern English that we had this great vowel shift. Now, I'm not a linguist, okay? I'm going to give you just some highlight points because I think we don't have to know everything about this. We really ought to know that it happened because that's what shifted our language to where it is today. And in some ways it helped, in some ways it maybe didn't. Some of the difficult pronunciations that we have and irregular pronunciations that we have came to us through this great vowel shift kind of thing. But it altered how the long vowels were articulated leading to some significant differences in pronunciation compared to the earlier forms of English. Basically, they say that the long vowels shifted upward, like in your mouth, in your head. That is, a vowel that used to be pronounced in one place of the mouth would be pronounced in a different place higher up in the mouth. And it's, the linguists study this stuff, and it's really, linguistics is actually a rather, I'll say, complex thing. They have diphthongs and all kinds of, they got their own lingo, about how we take apart and analyze language and the sounds that we make to make our language articulate, to make the sounds that have meaning and therefore communicate a thought to a listener, all right? And the linguists, when they talk about the great vowel shift, they talk about it happening in 8 steps, and it's important for us to remember that each step didn't happen overnight. We're talking about a couple hundred years that this came about, right? So it wasn't like, okay, let's flip a switch and, okay, we're going to spring forward one vowel sound at 2 o'clock in the morning, or we're going to spring back, that sort of thing. Not like daylight savings time, which, by the way, I haven't heard, has it been made permanent yet? They were talking about making daylight savings time permanent. Yeah, okay. Well, at any rate, this great vowel shift didn't happen overnight, but it definitely did. And at any given time, as this was happening, people of different ages and from different regions would have different pronunciations of the same word. Older, more conservative speakers would retain the pronunciation. See, there we are. While younger, more advanced speakers were moving to a new pronunciation. And isn't that the way it works now? I mean, the young people are always changing things on us, Hey, we had it this way. I'm sorry, Derek, we've had it this way all my life. And I'm at least twice as old as you probably. And how dare you come along and want to change things on us, Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Those little girls are going to change things on you already, right? I remember when we first, when Lydia was down about like this, we went over to it was the AT&T store at the time where we had our iPhones through, and they had a big mock-up, of an iPhone. And Lydia, had a picture of an iPhone with the home screen and all that kind of stuff. Back then, they had the home button down there at the bottom. And little bitty Lydia walks over there, and she sees that big, what looks to her like a big giant iPhone. It's a picture of one, but really, to her, it's shaped like an iPhone. So she reaches over and starts touching the home button. she wants to change things on the screen there, like, okay, this toddler is, Pastor Payne always says we're children of our times, and so there they are. But some people would be able to pronounce the same word 2 or more different ways. The same thing happens today, of course. I can pronounce the word that's spelled R-O-U-T-E. I can spell it as root, as in to rhyme with boot, or I can pronounce it. Or I can pronounce it as route, so as to rhyme with about. And you can switch from one pronunciation to another pronunciation in the midst of a conversation or even within the same sentence. I can say, well, let's take this route along Route 66. Okay, anybody been on Route 66? I used to live just a few miles off of Route 66. Used to be a TV show, Martin Milner, Route 66, 1960, 1964. Anybody watch Route 66? Yeah, there we go. That's my people right there. Absolutely, Quite, I would say proudly, but I don't like to think about it that way. But at any rate, just realistically, that's where it was. And so you can say route or route, and it's personal preference. Typically, we refer to the highway. I think it's typically we say Route 66 because of the TV show, that whatever, for us older guys. But these things, these kind of shifts, pronunciation shifts, because of the emphasis on the vowels, came into being and changed our language. And this great vowel shift began in the south of England, okay, in the 15th century. That's in the 1400s, right towards the end of the Middle English period. And it's really one of the historical events that marks the emergence of modern English from Middle English, was this vowel shift. They started no longer was it just adding words to the vocabulary, but it was how they said the words that shifted from Middle English to modern English. Now, why did that happen? I mean, it's like, okay, it wasn't like the country woke up one day and said, let's just change the way we say words. Let's change our pronunciation. Let's just make it happen. We do that with daylight savings time, right? But there were several, they don't really know what brought it about. Can you believe that? People weren't recording it and posting it on the internet back then for us to remember how it happened. But they have several ideas of how it may have happened. First of all, and I've got everything up here for you to look at, was population migration. That Black Plague caused people to move around some. And so that may have led to some dialect mixing. If people who speak one way move into an area with people who speak the other way, and they hang around long enough, and they interact enough, and they learn how to do business with each other, they maybe intermarry and that sort of thing, those dialects oftentimes will morph into something that's not either one of them. It's something new. Kind of levels things out. So that prompted some change in pronunciations. Secondly was the influence of the French, that Norman invasion, the conquest, that influx of French vocabulary and culture could have influenced, had to have in some way or another, influenced even how English words were said, just on pronunciations. The social mobility business, changes in the social structures and the desire to distinguish speech from different classes may have contributed to the shift. People are funny, they want to, a lot of times they, that's, I guess maybe the best case in point I have is we have this thing called influencers now, and I guess there's really a lot of these people out there. That's their thing, is they want to post stuff all the time, and they're sharing the details of their life in such a way as to get people to be impressed with who they are and what they do. And they influence other people to want to be like them and to do what they do and all that kind of stuff. So if they get on, if a very prominent influencer gets on there today and starts saying something one way, or they coin a phrase, they come up with something new or whatever, and if they have enough influence, if they're big enough of a name, then that catches on and people start talking like them. So when in aspect of societal levels of society, people oftentimes want to appear better off than they are. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to become better off than you are in reality. God doesn't have a problem with that. It's just the love of the money that you're trying to get that becomes a problem. It's not a problem to have money. It's not a problem to make money. God prospers us in ways. That's fine. But a lot of times people want to say, okay, my mother-in-law talked about, what is it, they forget their raisings or something like that. They forget where they came from. And they want to sound like, I may have been from Podunk, Arkansas, but I'd like to think I'm now from Midland, Michigan. Sir? Bring uppance? Yeah. Well, yes. And so that could have had an influence. People wanted to talk with a higher level of sophistication than they had before, back when they were a kid at home, you know what I mean? Anyway, and then there was the war with France. On the one end of the spectrum, you have the influence from the French. They came in and they gave us their vocabulary and all that kind of stuff, their words, their language. But then they kind of wore out their welcome. And I can't imagine France doing that. But at any rate, just the wars that they had with France, you think, okay, we conquered you, but okay, no, we've still got to fight you once in a while. And the anti-French sentiments that came about caused deliberate changes to make English sound less like French. And on the one hand, we took a lot of French-sounding stuff in and it changed us, but no, we don't want to sound so much like that, so let's change back or do something different altogether. Be that as it may, regardless of, and it could be a mixture of all these things. It could have been all these things that influenced this great vowel shift that came about, that changed the way we say words. But it added to the maturity and to the development of the English language. Now, it was crucial in the history of our language because it explains a lot of the peculiarities in English spelling and pronunciation that we have today. This shift is a key reason why modern English spelling often doesn't match pronunciation. We have letters that are silent. We have, other languages, German, even Spanish, those other languages. Throw out Arabic and Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, and stuff like that. We're talking about talking about languages that we can more readily enunciate ourselves. Tend to have fairly consistent rules about how they say words. German, lived in Germany for a few years, worked with Germans, and I was talking with one of my senior NCOs, and he was always trying to teach me German, and he always asked me to help him improve on his English. And I was trying to figure it out one day. We were talking. I says, Bernie, does the word catch or latch or match, the atch sound? I said, Bernie, does German have the ah sound as a vowel? Do you have ah in there? I guess a apple, he's no, German does not have sound. It's kind of like Well, there you go. We have a variety of things, and when Regina was teaching our kids, she taught all of our kids kindergarten and above. When she was homeschooling our kids and teaching them, basically she taught them and herself and me phonics. She and I didn't grow up with phonics. We had sight words and stuff like that. We didn't even know what phonics was. I wish I had. But I would listen to her teach the kids, and I began to learn phonics from my wife, thank you very much. And she learned it from teaching them to them from the ABECA curriculum. And it seemed to me that she spent almost as much time teaching the exceptions to the rules as she did to the rules. But, they have those blend charts, for the blending of the consonants and going, and she would repeat those things over and over with the kids, and I think she today can still say them in her sleep if she wants to. By the time she got all three kids up and running, and she didn't do too bad, We've got a doctor, a nurse, and what could be a teacher, but she's a homeschool mom, hometown full-time mom. So it didn't turn out too bad. So I guess all three communicate pretty well enough to get married to good people. Katie's was standing back there a minute ago. But the nuances and the intricacies of the English language, we who grew up learning it, it's our native tongue, we tend to take all that for granted. And we don't, unless you're teaching it to your children, homeschooling your children, and you're teaching it to them, and you have to realize how complex, but yet how, at the same time, how rich our language is. It truly is, I think, part of the will of God that we have this English language. Now, nevertheless, what was once scorned, really, as a barbaric language became of the plowmen, of laborers, of common people, became the language of patriots and poets, became a language that was fit for heroes on the one hand, and for the riches of the Bible on the other hand. English had begun to mature into something that not only stood for itself, but it stood for a people. It stood for a movement, if you will. And I find it interesting that, it says, gone were any hesitations about the merits of the English language. Again, we take our language, our mature modern language, for granted. Just like the air we breathe, we take it for granted. But there was quite a process that God brought our language through to get it to what we have now, and in particular, what we have now in this book. And so it became qualified. Now, what I was going to say, to me, it's an ironic thing that if I back up to this slide here, interestingly enough to me, Old English came about thanks to an inward invasion of England by the Ingles and the Saxons and the Jutes, and we got Old English out of that invasion. Middle English came to us by way of an invasion of England from the French, the Normans. They invaded and they influenced the English language. Well, now, as we go into modern English, the reverse is true. The tide has turned, the current has reversed. Instead of England itself being invaded and having its language changed, it internally took its language and enriched it and developed it with the great vowel shift and things like that. And it became the invader. It began going out. Instead of language coming into England, English, modern English, that got formed as a result of the great vowel shift and other influences, begins going out. Well, it goes out. Language goes out with people. Back then, they didn't have the internet, the broadcast, the telecast media, and that sort of thing. They didn't have a whole lot of print media. They didn't have, printing per se. They didn't have the newspapers per se. They had town criers. They passed the word along verbally. Stories were passed along verbally. Language traveled by people. People power is how language traveled, the influence of language was spread by people. Well, even today, if you set aside artificial intelligence, even today what we have in the media, it's generated and driven by people, is it not? Language is a people skill, okay, and a people tool, and a people weapon is what language is. And the people of England, with their more unified language, their now respected language, and they as a people are saying, wait a minute, we don't have to be invaded. We can repel any invaders, and in fact, we ourselves can become invaders if we want to be. And that's pretty much what happened, because you started having things like colonialization and things like that. Also, they had Queen Elizabeth I. Let me get back to where I was. Boom, Queen Elizabeth I. Lived from 1533 to 1603. And she was greatly used of God. The Virgin Queen never married. She's called the Virgin Queen. I don't know. She never married. And her reign and its effect on history gave name to the Elizabethan era. If you hear of the Elizabethan era, it's because of her, Queen Elizabeth I. And she reigned for quite a while. What I say here? She reigned from 1558 to 1603. So, a good long while. And interestingly enough, as a woman. Now, she was expected to marry, and they had all different kinds of things. Well, her older sister, Mary, she was queen for a while. She married poorly. She married a Spanish prince, Philip, and that didn't go well for her. So she looked at that and she says, I don't want to do that. So she was very leery of marrying and marrying poorly, because she had her country's interest at heart, it would seem, and she wanted what was best for her country. And she deemed it better for her country and her role as the queen, rather than have it be thwarted or messed with by marrying, perhaps poorly. She said, I will remain unmarried so that I might be married to my countrymen. And that's kind of what she did. And she provided some stability and had an interest. A lot of these rulers, they're just people too, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And there's all kinds of mess. Even you've got it even today. It's like, who can we really believe and trust? We can't get to know all these politicians as well and as deeply as we can our pastors here. I trust our pastors. I trust you guys. Why? Because I know you. I've seen you be faithful. I've seen you live the values that you profess. Well, what about these politicians? We knew Gary Glenn a lot like that. Pastor certainly did. But she stayed in office, and there's a lot of chicanery goes on in palace intrigue and stuff like that. We'll talk about that more when we start talking about the men behind there were also women behind the King James Bible as well. And we'll look at some of that and how we got King James I of England, who was King James VI of Scotland first. The maneuvering and like I said, the intrigue and the scheming and things that went on in these different courts. And a lot of times it was instigated by people who weren't necessarily the king or the queen, but they're advisors, the people, the hangers-on that want power that's not theirs. So all this stuff works together, and it kind of turns into, excuse me, in our case, with our Bible, excuse me, a Romans 8:28 thing. You know, all things working together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. You know, God worked in all that mess of humanity and leadership and royalty and nobility to orchestrate certain circumstances to where things became set up both historically, governmentally, socially, and linguistically in favor of us getting the King James Bible. Queen Elizabeth developed armies and navies that established England's military credentials. They became a nation of power. For a little old bitty island nation, of course, I mean, you know, you look at some of these others, you look at Denmark and Sweden and Norway, you know, you got those Vikings that go out and do stuff. So, you know, you don't have to be a really big to do big things. You just got to have some big aspirations and ambitions, and they did under Queen Elizabeth. But on the other hand, not just the military, but the culture, her poets, her playwrights, the translators that she had propelled English into the front rank of the living European languages. Her presence and her power that she wielded so effectively was a great front woman, if you will, for the English language. She garnered respect for England, which garnered respect for English. And as we'll see, one of the greatest things that she did, being childless, being unmarried, being childless, she picked her own successor. She's the one that said, I want James the Sixth of Scotland to become James the First of England. And that's how we had King James, who authorized and instituted or initiated the production of our King James Bible. All right? Now, the two greatest influences on the shaping of the English language are the works of William Shakespeare and the King James Bible. Now, I'm not trying to put the two on the same equal footing, but they certainly are. And I put Shakespeare on the left because that's just the way it worked in my picture when I put my picture up there. But I'm not trying to equate the two. I'm just saying that they both equally, not equally, but they both had the greatest, between the two of them, they had the greatest impact. We don't need William Shakespeare. We got the King James Bible. But as it turns out, that helped develop the respect for the English of the King James Bible. In part 2 of our study, we're going to look at, and we look at the message of the King James Bible, we're going to see various examples of terminology, expressions in the King James Bible that we still use in our language today. Well, especially us older conservative people. I don't know about you young whippersnappers or not, but at any rate, there's a lot of expressions that we have, colloquialisms they're called, that are from the Bible. And people don't even realize they're quoting the Bible when they say things. We'll take a look at those. That's kind of cool to me. But I want to make 3 observations from Professor McGrath here at Oxford there. He says, well, number 1, I'm going to just read these quotes from his book. The King James Bible consolidated the enormous advantages in the English language over the centuries and can be seen as the symbol of a nation and language that believed that their moment had finally arrived. They were aware of themselves and who they were as a people. And they said, we're not going to be subservient to any other people. We're not going to serve under any other invaders. We're going to turn the tide. Quote on second quote here. In his quote, in his 1589, as in the year 1589, in his 1589 work entitled Art of English Poesy, written at the height of the Elizabethan age, George Putnam declared that English was just as sophisticated as Greek or Latin and perfectly capable of expressing the full range of human emotions and thoughts. So you see, English has matured in such a way that's being not just recognized, but touted as having that level of maturity. Third quote from the professor is, quote, to write in English or translate into English was a political act, affirming the intrinsic dignity of the language of a newly confident people and nation. And why should not that nation have its own Bible in its own language? Why not? And so it was brought about. In fact, there were several iterations that we'll see in our next segment of our study, the earlier translations of the Bible, of the original languages into English, that were the forefathers, if you will, of our King James, that purified 7 times. We'll look at how from the Wycliffe work on translating the Bible to the 7th purification being the King James Bible. We went through that. It was ready to be done. The language was ready to be used to do this book. To summarize what our good professor said, English matured to the point of being ready to manifest itself in the monarch of Bibles, the King James Bible. Now, I have a few more minutes. Let's go a little bit further. I want to talk about the growth of English around the world. Instead of things coming to England and English began going out, right? And so following the very extensive influence of Great Britain and the United Kingdom from the 17th century, the 1600s, to the mid-20th century via the British Empire, and then of us, the United States, since the mid-20th century, that's when we really hit our stride, around World War II time, pretty much an invincible country. English has been widely propagated around the world, and it's become the leading language of international discourse. And interestingly, English has become the dominant lingua franca of the world, the lingua franca. What do we mean by this lingua franca business? Well, here's some information about that to understand what a lingua franca is. It's a language systematically used to make communication possible between groups of people who do not share a native language or dialect, particularly when it is a third language that is distinct from both of the speaker's native languages. I gave you the illustration of my 2 German colleagues in my NATO assignment, where one was from the north of Germany, where their dialect up there is actually, it's up, you'd think it'd be up, but it's actually lower dialect, lower German, and they consider it lower because it's a lower altitude, much like you always go up to Jerusalem, no matter where you come from on the map. Well, northern Germany had lower German, has lower German. They do have a proper German, and then down south, they have the upper German, higher elevation, 2 different dialects, and one guy was from north, one guy was from south, and they humorously but sincerely told me that they use English to speak to because they can understand each other in English better than they can in their respective Germans. So they're like, okay, cool, that's fine. A lingua franca is also a bridge language, a common language, a trade language. It oftentimes serves between 2 different languages that, okay, I don't want to learn Italian, I don't want to learn Chinese, we'll learn English, and we'll both talk in English, becomes our trade language. It's a term, the term lingua franca is taken from the medieval Mediterranean lingua franca, which is a common pidgin language we're talking about the Mediterranean, okay? The Mediterranean is a melting pot, if you will, of languages around the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean lingua franca had Italian mixed with French, Spanish, Greek, and Arabic that was spoken by the traders in the Mediterranean ports from the 11th to the 19th century. So these guys who were making money off communicating with each other, you look around you're talking about the languages that are around the Mediterranean, Italian, French, Spanish, Arabic. They all traveled the Mediterranean and traded, and so they developed their own little lingua franca to be able to communicate. A lingua franca also becomes something of a world language, a language spoken internationally and by many people, and as such may function as a global lingua franca, which I submit to you is what we have in English language. As we take this apart a little bit, we'll see, wow, it's kind of amazing that what we can see here kind of in the catbird seat in the middle of America, to see the influence of English and what it is doing Oh, that we as a nation could truly have the influence that our language has. If we had the political influence that to match our linguistic influence, we would be unstoppable as a country. But then other people get a hold of our language and they become, they get in it with us. When I talk about English as a lingua franca, I'll get into more of it next week. But it is indeed the dominant language of the world. Like I said, we'll look and compare and see where we rank, where English ranks among the other languages of the world. Again, I say all this, we're looking at English as a language because it is the language of the King James Bible. And we look at the influence that English has. Well, guess what? The English Bible then can have the same level of influence if it's properly utilized, if it's properly wielded. If we'll do like the Thessalonians did and sound out the Word of God throughout the world that is learning our language, that is learning the language of our Bible, we would have all the greater reach for the glory, for the gospel and the glory of God. So that's why we're looking at English. That's why we're looking at how it now, as modern English, is so pervasive around the globe. It's opening doors for us. I mean, Adam and Candace Branscombe got to go to China because Chinese wanted to learn English. And Adam and Candace went there to teach it. And others have. It opened doors to places that were closed. It's done. God has used this language as a master key to unlock the globe to those who have the King James Bible if they would but use it. It's an amazing thing. Father, thank you very much for what you've done with our language, what you've done with our Bible that you've given to us in our language. Father, as we study our English and we appreciate what we have and see what we have in the extensive acceptance of English around the world, that we see, Father, the opportunity that we have to use that influence to spread the gospel. Help us to turn this world inside out with the King James Bible. Thank you, Lord, for what we've got. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for being here, guys.